Welcome everyone. It's good to see y'all. So this is the advanced meeting, so we're going to assume that you have a bit of experience with programming, and what we'll be doing today is some exciting game development. So before I get started, I just want to show everyone that what we'll be going over today um, will be available right here. So on the classroom page here, yeah, there we go. If you look under Python game development, we've assembled kind of a document over what we're going to go over. And in case at any point in the meeting you're kind of lost or you need to look back at something, or even after the meeting, if you want to look back on it, this will be available for you. And also, I'm recording this meeting, so for anyone who misses it, or if you again want to look back at it and you prefer kind of the video format, that's available for you guys. But again, I just want to say it's good to see you all, and hopefully this will be some fun. So, to get started, what we're going to do, and I'm going to kind of follow this right here, is you're going to want to download Python if you don't already have it on your computer. Of course, some of you guys might already do Python code on your computers. Some of you guys might have learned it from a course or at school, so you might not have it installed. So for this to be able to actually run your code and see the game, you're going to have to install Python directly onto your computer. So the installer is available here. It's a link, python.org, and you can just click download. And it looks like they actually released a new version yesterday, or yeah, yesterday. So I'm actually a version behind, so I'm on 3.9, but don't worry, 3.10 should work. And once you guys have that, if you're on Windows, you're going to see kind of an installer pop up like this. I'm going to zoom in. So kind of an installer pop up like this. And all you're going to want to make sure you do is over here, you're going to want to make sure you check off add Python 3 point or whatever it is to path, right? And what this will do is it'll let us do some commands later, and I'll show you guys that. So I'm just going to give a bit of time for you guys to do that. It might take some time to download. And once you have everything set up till that point, you have Python installed on your computer, just kind of let me know, raise your hand so I can see where we're at. And if you already have this installed, then also just raise your hand so I know where we're at. Okay, thank you guys. The other thing I want to say, guys, is if you have any questions at any point in this meeting, feel free to ask them either in the chat or even turn on your mic. It's totally fine if you interrupt the meeting. I'm not going to like be upset at you, and any question is encouraged because chances are if you have a question, others will as well. AM. So, good question. Will we be doing OpenGL? So, for those of you who don't know what that is more of like a lower level graphics framework. And what I can say is I have worked with it. So, if you do need help with that, or you have some kind of question, I can help you out with that. But for now, what we'll be doing is working with Pygame. So, Pygame's a little higher up, but in the future, it's possible we'll cover it. I just think that it's more of a technical thing. So before I cover it, I'd like to, do some more basic stuff before that. So that's really advanced. But it's definitely super interesting. If you feel comfortable with learning it, I strongly encourage you to. And yeah, if you ever have a question, like feel free to email me or message me. I can provide my Instagram handle if that's any easier. So you can message me here as well. And that goes for anyone if you have any questions. Alrighty, so we have three
Uh,
who have.
one thing. As soon as it's finished downloading, there's a prompt whether or not to disable path length limit.
Good
Uh,
good question. That really shouldn't matter.
okay.
That's just to do with like how long a file path can be, so how many folders you can have inside folders. But assuming you don't do anything crazy, you'll be fine if it's disabled or if it's enabled. It doesn't really affect much.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good question though. I think so. As long as it's like a Python 3 version, so 3 point something, you should be good. Just make sure it's not Python 2. Python 2 won't work with this. They're quite different. Yeah, that works. Awesome.
I just wanted to add as well a little bit that it takes like a lot to hit the file path limit. Like it takes like tons of folders. Like it's nothing you will ever reach.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. All right. I'm going to hope that most people will be able to follow along if I continue. Um, and if you're behind, if you're still installing it, um, don't worry, you'll be able to catch up. I have like all of the next steps in the document again, including later when we start writing the code. So if you're a little behind because you need to install, like, don't worry, don't stress about it. So for those of you who have everything set up till that point, um, if you're on Windows, you're going to need to open up command prompt. So you can either do that by opening up your start menu and searching for it, or you can press like this Windows key, it's on the left of your keyboard, bottom left, and R, and that will open up this window, and inside of it you can type in cmd.exe, and that'll open up the exact same thing. So either of those two, whichever you find simpler. Or if you're on Mac, you're going to need to open up terminal, and so that's just, you can find it in the Launchpad, or you can search for it using Spotlight Search. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. And then also, if you're not on Windows or Mac, let me know. I might be able to help you out with that as well. And so what you will see is kind of a window like this. It might be white, might be black, and it's going to have some text in it, or a kind of space where you can enter text. And inside of here, we'll kind of enter a command, which will help us install Pygame. Online IDEs like Replit unfortunately won't work. The reason is because we're actually going to have a window in our game that gets created, and we're going to draw things onto that window. So if you use Replit, you're only going to have access kind of to the command line, so kind of the console where you see all the characters printed out. And I don't think it's possible to do Pygame with Replit. So you'll have to install it onto your computer. If you're not able to install it, let me know. I might be able to help you out.
Yeah, I think I might have to re-download Python because it's not recognizing those as a command.
So you've tried everything that I've kind of sent.
Yeah, I thought it checked the box, but I'll do it again just in case.
Okay. Um, and if these don't work also, you can try kind of diagnose, see if just typing in Python works. Like, and see if that opens up kind of the Python interpreter. I can kind of show what that will look like. So if I actually do that on my computer here, if I type in Python, it's going to kind of enter the Python, and here I can do anything Python related, so like print, right? But this is just to test that Python is installed. So if you can see here, I typed in Python. Also, let me know if the text is too small. Um, and then here you can see the version. So Python 3.9.7 is the version I'm on. Actually, I can show you how it looks when you install. So when you type in pip install Pygame, or not Python, Pygame, right? You'll press enter. I need to first uninstall it, so I think it's pip uninstall Pygame. And it'll delete it, so I'm just going to delete it. But I'm just doing this to show you guys how to install it. That's a lot of red. Hopefully nothing went wrong. So pip install Pygame. And it's going to look like this. So it's going to print out a few messages, and hopefully at the end you'll see successfully installed Pygame. If you don't see that, if it gives you some kind of error, let me know, and I can troubleshoot it with you. And just so I know, again, if you could like raise your hand, so if you have your hand raised, lower it, and if you have Pygame installed, either keep it up or raise your hand, just so that I know, again, that like we're doing good. And in the meantime, I will point out, if you wish, right here, you can install Visual Studio Code. And this is just an editor. It doesn't actually affect how the code you run, how the code you write will run. It just might make kind of following the tutorial a little easier. And there's nothing wrong with not having it installed. You can use the one that's built in. It's called idle, so you'll have to like search for it in your start menu. You can download it here, and you'll also need the Python extension if you choose to use this editor. If you don't feel like you need it, or it's too complicated for you, then no need. And if you feel like after this meeting you would rather get it installed, you can also do it after the meeting, and you can let me know if you have any trouble with this. So again, email, Instagram, however you want to reach out to me, you're totally welcome to, and I can help you out with getting this installed on your computer. And in the meantime, I'd just like to ask, like, how is everyone doing? Are you guys tired after school? Are you guys good with these meetings after school? And we'll move on shortly, so you can see already that the next kind of step is going to be actually starting to code the game, so that's the fun part.
I really like having these meetings after school. I think you picked the perfect time because my commute to get home is like an hour, so it's perfect time for me to get home, kind of relax, and then get set up for the meeting.
Awesome. Good to hear. Would that be for this, or?
That was for the window with the code you had up earlier.
Oh, this thing.
Yep.
See, I can increase the size, but I'll have to. Oh, I can. Yes, awesome, beautiful. I can zoom it in. So that's what it'll look like usually. So you should look out for. Oops, that was not meant to be here. Should look for this here, and if you've got it, then you're good. Okay, so I think it should be safe for us to move on. Again, if you don't have everything set up quite yet, just keep going, keep trying. If you have any issues, let me know in the chat, or you can ask the question. And in the meantime, I will move on. So I don't want to waste everyone's time forever getting everyone to install everything. So I think it's time for us to start coding. So what we're going to want to do is create a place where we can save our code. So I've already created a folder here, is jumper. So you'd basically just create a new folder, call it whatever you want, right? And then inside of here, right, you would create your files. So you would, for instance, click new, and then usually I just click text document. And this is if you're on Windows. On Mac, it might be different. So unfortunately, I can't help out with that. And then in here, I would name it. So for example, main.py or mygame.py, right? Something to note is that by default, if I undo this, you'll notice that for me, it shows new text document .txt, right? But it doesn't show this by default, the file extension, and it won't be visible. It will just show new text document for you, right? So what you're going to want to do is click on View up here, and then make sure you have file name extensions. This little tiny checkbox. I can't really actually. I'll have to see if I can make this bigger. Here, there. So hopefully that works. So again, this little tick box over here, file name extensions. So when you tick it off, this is kind of what you'll see normally, just new text document. You want to have that enabled, and then you want to make sure you change that txt to a .py. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll rename it like this and then call it main.py or whatever, right? And it'll just still be a text document. And because what's happening is it's actually renaming it to main.py.txt, which is not what you want. It's not going to work that way. So just a little heads up. Okay, so I'm not actually going to do it in this folder. And first I'm going to revert what I did there. So I've created my own folder. It's called Jumper. And in here, we'll be creating our code. Before I actually start making the code though, I do want to kind of show off what the final project is going to be, just so you guys have an idea in what direction we're going to head. So I'll quickly open it up. So, and I should be able to make this bigger like so. There we go. And is it working? Interesting. It's not working. Okay, I guess we'll have to deal with this. Yeah, it's just frozen on that version. So, oh, I know exactly why it's frozen. It's because I already have one open. Okay, there we go. So, it's going to be called Jumper, and it's going to be just a simple kind of platform-based game. You're going to jump on platforms. We're going to perform collision detection. We're going to draw text to the screen. We're going to draw shapes to the screen. And I'm going to teach you guys how to create kind of this acceleration-based movement, how to implement gravity, and all sorts of things to do with game development. I think some of the most challenging parts are kind of structuring the whole project, as well as things like collision detection, as those are sometimes harder to wrap your head around, right? And we'll make sure to cover all of it in depth, right? And as you saw just there, kind of the color of the background can change. So we add a few nice features to the game. And lastly, we even have kind of a score tracking system. So if I end the game, you can see it shows your score. It also shows the best score, and it kind of saves it. So even when you close the game and start it again, you'll have the best score saved. And that way you can even compete with your friends, see who's the best at this game. And you can see we even do things like animate the text. So you might be wondering how all of this is done, and so we're going to cover all of it in depth over the next few weeks during these meetings. So now that we have that covered, let's get started on the code. So
some people in chat said something.
Good, thank you for telling me. So I got an error installing Pygame, could not find a version that satisfies the requirement. Pygame. Same. Oh, are you guys on Python 3.10? I wonder if that's the problem. Aha. Okay, so what that must mean is that Pygame hasn't been updated for 3.10, I think. I think that's what's the matter. So I didn't actually anticipate this to happen, a new Python release coming out a day kind of before the meeting. So it looks like Pygame isn't updated. So you guys are going to have to install Python 3.9 then from that website. So I'll have to show you guys. So sorry about this. I didn't anticipate this to happen. So if we go here and go back to the downloads page up here, you'll have to go to Python 3.9.7 and then download here. So I'll put the link in the chat here. and this version should work. Is there anyone else having any trouble? I just don't want this meeting to run too late, you know? I don't want you guys to get bored, so I'm thinking I will continue on, but if a lot of people are having this issue...
I'm having a little bit of trouble, but only on the next piece of code when you import Pygame.
Okay, well, I might as well help you out right now. So, is it giving some kind of error?
Yes, I'll copy paste it. Import Pygame could not be resolved. Pylance report missing imports.
So that's like the error you see when you just kind of hover over it, I'm imagining, right? So it's kind of like a squiggly line. Okay. If you just make that file and then add like a print hello world right underneath kind of the import Pygame, and then run the file, like the file that has the import Pygame in it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, does print hello world, or do you get an error still? Because that just looks like your IDE might be a little behind and not realizing that you have Pygame installed. Something else you guys could do is, if you want to follow along, and kind of code as I go, you can wait on the installation, create the files, create the Python files, as long as you can open up an editor. And then either you can stick around afterwards or in your own time, you can see if you can get all this Pygame stuff working and actually have your code run. And again, the document's always there, so you can refer back to that. Okay, awesome. So you do get hello world. Okay, so for those of you who are getting that error, could not find a version that satisfies the requirement Pygame, don't use Python 3.10 quite yet. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. All right. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to open up this folder. And so I created main.py. I'm also going to create a new file. It's going to be called setup.py. So kind of like in the guide. Don't worry, this is too small. I'm going to open up my editor here. So let me make this bigger for you guys. There we go. That should do, hopefully. Are you guys able to see kind of the screen? And then if I type in here, are you guys able to see this?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, good. So we'll be getting started. So we have main.py and setup.py. So I'm going to start out with setup.py. Okay, so Sahil, if you want to start with this now, I'll start typing and you can kind of go over what we're doing. So
All right.
the first thing we're going to do is import Pygame.
So we're just going to be initializing Pygame, right?
Yeah, and so this will just initialize all of the modules. So later we'll look at what those modules are, but basically Pygame consists of a bunch of functionality, and this will attempt to initialize it all. So this just needs to be run before you start your Pygame program.
And now we're going to make two variables, screen width and screen height, right? We're going to be putting 640 for both of them. And this will just be constant values, right? That's why they're in all capitals, right?
Mm-hmm.
As that's naming conventions for Python.
Yeah, so this is just the window size in pixels. So that's all you need for setup. I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of time so you can copy it over, but it's pretty basic. And you'll notice that we kind of define these two variables on the same line. You guys should kind of figure out what the syntax means, hopefully. And again, if you do need the code and I move on or I'm not exactly there, the document should have a copy available. Okay, so now in main.py, we're going to import this setup file.
So that import statement is basically just saying import everything from setup, right? The star means everything, right? So this will be importing those variables we made. It'll be importing Pygame. So over here we're making dimensions, right? And that's a tuple, which is a list of items, right? A collection of items that are ordered and they can't be changed later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because those are constants, we don't need to change them later, so it's fine.
And so what we're doing here is we're creating a window. So pygame.display.setMode is a Pygame function that creates a window for us, and it takes in the window dimension. So when Pygame creates the window, it needs to know kind of how big the window is going to be. So that's 640 by 640. And what it'll return is this kind of surface which we can draw things onto. So kind of imagine it like our canvas. So we're going to save this because we're going to need it to draw things onto it, right? So screen will be kind of the object that we're going to draw onto. So this is kind of the window size, and I'm just splitting this out for readability. And then we're going to create a screen that has a window of this dimension. Next, we're going to have a while loop over here. So every game has a main update loop, as you're going to want to have things update as things change in your game, right? So you can imagine a game as a series of pictures that are continuously changing to kind of reflect the state of the game. So if you have, for example, a bouncing ball, that's going to draw multiple kind of pictures of a ball moving across the screen very quickly in succession within a second, right? And the way we're going to simulate that is by having a while true loop that loops continuously, updating the screen. So in here, Sahil, I guess, would you like to type the rest of this while
Yeah,
loop here?
I
All
can do
right.
that.
And so what Sahil here is typing is screen.fill. What this will do is basically fill in the canvas with the color he entered here. So you might be looking at this and kind of wondering what this means. So we have 255, 255, 255. And what this actually is a tuple with 3 values for red, green, and blue. So if you want to learn more exactly on how those colors work, there's a link in the document. But essentially, each of these values affects how bright each color is. And using the 3 colors, red, green, and blue, you can kind of create any color that our eye can see. So by having 255, 255, 255, we're having red, green, and blue light all at full intensity. And that kind of produces the color white. And we'll see that when we actually run the program. And I'll tweak it around just to show you kind of what these colors do. And next, you're going to want to do pygame.display.update. And what this will do is I'll actually push these changes that we made. So for example, filling the screen. Or later, for example, we draw a rectangle. And it's going to fill that. So it's going to fill the screen. And then it's going to actually update that, show it to the user. And again, we'll kind of look at why this happens later, but just note that when you draw something, it doesn't appear immediately on the screen. It appears when you call pygame.display.update. And for that reason, we want to be calling this at the end of every single frame. So you'll see this kind of will be always at the bottom of our while loop. And that's basically all you need for a basic Python program. Now you'll notice there are going to be some problems with it, but we'll look at that in just a second. So I'm going to save both of these files, make sure they're saved, and then I'm going to run main.py. And what you're going to see is a white window, and it's in the square shape that we wanted it to be, right? But you might also notice, and it's a little tiny for you guys, but my cursor is currently a blue spinning circle. And now Windows thinks that my program is not responding. Oh, I see raised hands, so are there questions?
No, I just wanted to say that Replit, this is like an online IDE. It actually works with Pygame.
It
You
does?
can import Pygame, and it like opens a window and everything. It works perfectly.
Oh, that's
Well,
awesome.
I can't say perfectly. I haven't really done anything more than this basic exercise, but otherwise, it seems to be working just fine.
That's actually really good to know.
So
Okay.
if you're on a Chromebook, you can still follow along, I think.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. So that's actually really good for anyone that's having trouble with installing all of this. You can actually try Replit. I did not know that you could do Pygame with Replit. That's actually really, really cool.
The one thing you have to do is you have to create the project as a Pygame file, because otherwise if you try to do it with Python, you can't really import, or you can't really get
Okay,
Pygame.
so when you create a project, make sure to select Pygame.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I'll have to look into that, and maybe I can show it better next lesson. Okay. Well, anyways, back to where I was going. You'll notice that Windows actually thinks that my game is currently not responding. And you'll also notice this blue spinning cursor. So, the problem is basically that we're not dealing with the events the system's sending, and so the operating system doesn't know if our program is responding. If you notice, when I press the X button, nothing happens, and now we get this pop-up. Now this button will forcibly close our program, but that's not what we want. We want a graceful exit of our program. So, as I was saying, we want to have our program actually respond to operating system events so that it doesn't hang up, and so that the close button actually works in our program. So that's going to be the next thing we're going to want to implement. Okay, so Sahil here typed out pygame.event.get. What this will do is it'll basically look for all the system events that have been sent. It'll clear them and also loop over them, because we're looping over them in this for loop. And so that could include things like key presses, it could include things like mouse movements, and it can include things such as the user events like closing the window, right? So that X button or maybe Alt F4 on your keyboard, that can close a window. So that's basically what we need to do. We need to detect when the user sends this event. We want them to close the program, right? So if they press the X, we need to detect that they pressed that red X and actually exit out of this infinite loop we've got going over here, right? And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to make it so that we can actually control this while loop with a variable. We're going to create a value and we're going to call it kind of is running, or honestly it could be anything, but I think that kind of sums it up. And so at the beginning, is going to be set to true. We're going to want our program to continuously loop, to update, to draw new frames, right? But once the user actually presses that X button, what they're going to see is that is running will be set to false, and then the window will just gracefully close. There we go. So again, to sum up, we're going to loop over all events, and then we're going to check if the event type is pygame.quit. And so that just means they press that red X, right? And we'll set is running to false. The loop will continue until the end, but then the next time it'll be set to false and it'll exit out. So we'll reach this point, at which point we're going to want to call pygame.quit. You're not technically required to, but it's a good idea because what it'll do is it'll initialize all of the stuff that we did. And in case you do something after this, you want to clean that up. That being said, this should be automatically called when the program exits. So it's up to you if you put that there, but that's what that does. It'll basically do the inverse effect of pygame.init, which we called in the setup file. All right. And one more quick thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to set the window title. So right under here, right, if you notice, and actually, Sahil, I'm just going to comment this out real quick. I want to show what it looks like. So you can see by default right over here, if you run it, it's going to say Pygame window. And so we want to change that. We want to show our game title. So we're going to do pygame.display.set caption. So that'll just simply set the window title to what we want. And we'll set to the title of our game, Jumper. All right. And I just want to go back to this color thing. So I want to show how this color works and also show you guys that indeed the game is actually continuously updating. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a quick variable. You guys don't have to follow this, by the way. I just want to show how this works. So I'm going to create a value R. That's just going to be our red value here. And then I'm going to set it to R modulus 255. So that means it'll loop back to 0 after it hits the 255. And then I'm going to add 1 to it every frame, just to show kind of this effect of the color starting at 0 and then going to 255. Oh god, I forgot to set these to 0. And it's going to flicker. Okay, it's pretty quick. But that shows the effect of 0 meaning nothing, and then 255 meaning full brightness. So if you notice, it kind of pulses from 0 to full brightness. Hey Max, I saw you joined. We're running a little behind, but we'll have to get through this.
Yeah, I can tell. No problem.
We had some issues. So Python released 3.10 today, and Pygame's not out for that, so people weren't able to run. And we also had to set up a few things. So
Oh really?
we're a little
I hope
behind.
I hope Pygame comes out for that because I told people to download the latest version today. So.
Okay. Alrighty. So we have this figured out, and our window can now close. So when I run it, it's currently a black screen because I set to 0, 0, 0. And when I exit out, it closes nicely. So before it was hanging up, and yeah. Oh, I deleted the fill. Here, let me just type that in again. So we're going to want to fill it in with white. Okay. So once we have this set up, we have the basic Pygame program. So once we have this, we can start implementing. Oh yeah, good job, good catch. Screen.fill. We're going to want to start adding features to our game. So for this day, we're basically going to add a player, and we're going to simulate gravity on that player and also draw that player to the screen, right? So to do that, we're going to create a new file. It's going to be player.py. Inside of here, we're going to create a class. And so what this class will be responsible for doing is handling all of kind of the player-related functionality. We're going to have kind of everything that happens at the beginning of the game. We're going to want to kind of update any logic related to the player, so how it moves, that's a part of its logic, right? Maybe jumping behavior, that could be part of its logic, and we'll be adding onto it as time progresses. And then we're also going to want to implement kind of the drawing functionality. So how does this player get displayed to the user?
Sorry, Alex. I really hate to interrupt you like halfway through, but I think there's like 2 people with hands on the Google Meet.
Okay.
My apologies. My hand was left up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was guessing those were old hands, but if there are questions, like, yeah.
Okay.
No
Yeah,
worries,
they're all
no
done. Okay.
worries, no worries.
And
if you have questions and I'm not seeing the raised hands, like, interrupt me. Go for it. Don't be shy. Okay. So yes, we're going to want to define class player, And then inside of here, we're going to want to create 3 methods. That's going to be init, and this is just kind of a Python thing. If you want to learn why, refer to some info about kind of how classes work. Basically, this will run at the beginning when this player is initialized. So when we create a new player, this will run. And if you look here, Sahel's just adding paths. This is just so we don't get errors. So you might notice otherwise we get those red squigglies. This basically just means do nothing. So we don't have anything implemented in here at the moment. And then we're going to have update and draw. These are just methods that we defined, and they're going to do, this one's going to be called every frame to update any player logic. And this one's going to be called every frame to draw the player to the screen. Now inside of here, we're going to want to have some values that are going to be used across every instance of players. So even though in our game, there's only going to be one player, it's possible that maybe you would extend this game to have multiplayer functionality, right? And later we'll be looking at different objects which will have, multiple instances. So for example, the platforms in our game, right? Another thing to consider is that having these values stored means we can access them without referring to a specific instance of a player. So if we were to create a player, right, and then we needed somewhere else in our program to know, oh, how wide or how tall is the player, which will be kind of values which we define right now, the width and the height, we'll be able to access them just by importing kind of player.py, and we won't have to refer to a specific instance of a player. We'll just need to know kind of the idea of what a player even is, right? So these values will kind of affect all players in the game. And the other value we're going to use is just, for now, we're going to define color, and that's going to be the color of the rectangle we draw onto the screen. So if you saw in the final game product, we have a rectangle and it was filled with black. Okay. So now in init, let's define a position. The reason we're going to define this inside of...
Someone raised a hand.
Yeah. Question?
Sorry, I don't know. I might have missed this if you said it, but I'm just curious. I see you set width and height to 25 and 50. Is this what does the 50 mean? Like 50 pixels?
Yeah, pixels. Good question.
Uh-huh.
So as you saw, like in setup, we defined the window to be 640 by 640. So you can kind of imagine what the scale of the player would be if it's kind of, it would be kind of like 1/24th roughly of the screen. So it's pretty small, but it's still visible for the player. So this is the size in pixels. Okay, so back to this. Inside of init, we're going to define self.position in here. And basically, this is going to be specific to each instance of players. So it doesn't really make sense to have a general position for all players, right? It's going to be specific to each instance of a player. So we're going to define it in here, and that means we won't be able to just access it as kind of a general value. We'll actually have to know what player we're referring to get their position, right? So in here, we're going to define the position, and we're going to do this using a vector. So you might ask, what is a vector? And actually, before we do that, you might notice Pygame was not defined. So to do that, you basically just need to import setup, because in setup, we set up Pygame, right? So we're going to just, from now on, in every file, include setup, right? So what is a vector? A vector is basically just a type which has a horizontal and a vertical component. So X and a Y. So that really makes sense for position, right? If you kind of imagine kind of a coordinate space where you have X as horizontal, Y as vertical, you can get any position by using these two coordinates, right? And we'll be adding to them individually or together to produce different kinds of positions. So the reason we're doing this in a vector and rather than storing them as separate values, so for example, position underscore X and position underscore Y, is that when we have a vector, it's a lot easier to just add them together or perform other operations. So for example, if I wanted to add, 5, a vector which had a 5 as the x coordinate, we could just easily add that to our position, and then that would be added, and so the x and the y would be added separately, basically. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you have a vector, it has kind of an x and a y, and if you add two different vectors together, each x gets added together and each y gets added together. And this 2 over here, so vector 2, just refers to the fact that there's kind of the two components, the x and the y. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll use this position for now to figure out how we're going to draw the player onto the screen. So let's just take a quick look at how we actually draw things in Pygame. Essentially, what we'll need to do is we'll need to define a shape to draw, so kind of where this shape's going to be located, what kind of shape it is, and its size. And then once we have this shape ready, we can actually tell Pygame to draw it using some parameters like where we're going to draw it to and what color to draw it, right? So our player is a rectangle, so we're going to create a rectangle. Yeah. So as you see, Sahil's typing out pygame.rect. So this refers to a rectangle, and inside you're going to have to position. We're going to pass in the position and the width and the height. So we have the x, the y positions, right? So the horizontal, vertical position, and then the width and the height of the player. I'm going to zoom this. Actually, I might not have to zoom it out. There we go. And then once we have this shape, right, we can actually tell Pygame to draw it. Now screen's not defined, right? So screen is going to be any surface we want to draw this player onto. Typically that's going to be our window display, right? So if you remember, we created that window earlier and then we saved it in screen. So we're going to want to pass that screen into kind of this draw function. And then when we tell Pygame to draw it, it knows where to actually draw this rectangle to. Otherwise, it has no clue. It just knows that we want to draw a rectangle, but it doesn't know where to draw it onto, right? So we need to actually tell Pygame where to draw it. And so what this will do is it'll actually draw a rectangle at 0, 0, which in Pygame is going to be kind of the top left corner of your window. So let's actually get this working. Let's see it happen. So what we're going to do is leave this as is, right? And we're going to create a player in our main file and draw them to the screen, right? So we have the screen. So first things first, we need to create an instance of the player. So before we can do that, we're going to want to import the player, right? So from the file player, we're going to import the player class, right, that we defined over here. And then at the beginning of our game, so for now that's over here, we're going to want to create a player. And then in here, we're going to want to tell this player to update and to draw. And you might notice right now, there's nothing in update, but there is going to be some stuff that happens in draw. And it's fine to call update because we tell it to pass. It'll just know that we don't want to do anything quite yet. And we'll add some functionality to this in just a second. Okay, awesome. So now what will happen is at the beginning, we'll create a kind of instance of our player. And then every single frame in this while loop, we're going to update it and then draw it to the screen, right? And so you'll notice we're passing in the screen, which we defined, into here so it knows where to draw. So let's run this. Oh no, invalid syntax. I was having this error earlier, but it's okay. I know how to fix it. There we go. So if you actually look, you can see this rectangle. That's our player right now, and they're being drawn in the top left corner of the screen. So that's perfect. Now, we want to actually simulate kind of motion on this player. So let's get started with that. Let's see if we could just get this player to move from the left side over to the right side. So how do we do this? Well, the elegant way of doing this would be to define kind of how the player moves, so it's speed, right? But since we're referring to speed kind of with a direction, it's going to be the velocity, right? Because it's going to be also a vector, and it's going to have an x and a y component, a horizontal and a vertical component, right? And it could be positive or negative each, and it's going to basically reflect the change in position every single update, right? So every time we call update, this is how much our position is going to change by, right? And so, as we mentioned earlier, these vectors can be added very easily, right? So all we have to do is self.position plus equals self.velocity. And what will happen is basically every single time we call update, it'll add 0.5 to our position and then 0 to our position y, right? So we're starting at 0, 0, and because this is 0, the y will never change, but every time we call update, position will increase by 0.5. And we'll be able to actually see this in our code now. So when we run it, the player is going to move from the left to the right. Now that might be a little quick, just so I'm going to slow it down so you guys can see it, right? So 0.1, and you're going to see the player is indeed moving every single frame. It's freezing up again. Fantastic. There we go. Is it working? Give me a sec. Let me run this again. There we go. So you can see the player's kind of moving from left to right. And so every update is moving. Now, something you might notice, I use 0.1 here, but as of right now, this update is just being told to update as fast as it can. And what this means is on different computers, it gets updated at different rates because some computers are faster, some computers are slower. So we'll fix this in the future, but just note, because we're just setting this to this fixed value, what's happening is on my computer, it might go faster, and on your computer, it might go slower, or the other way around. You might have a faster computer than mine, and it'll go even faster than what you're seeing. So you might have to adjust this value for now to your own computer speed, basically, so that you can actually see it move. Otherwise, it might go really quickly, it might go terribly slow, right? So just keep that in mind. In the future, we'll fix this so that one value works for all and all computers kind of show it the same way. Okay. Up to this point, are there any questions about this? Because I know it might be a little tricky to wrap your head around some of this stuff. And if not,
Sorry,
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
missed just like one word in main. Can you go back there like real quick?
Yeah. So I realized this exact version
Nice.
isn't exactly in here, but basically we're creating the player and then we're updating and drawing it. And we also have to import it, otherwise we'll get an error.
Yeah, I caught it. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. So then the last part is going to involve us actually adding gravity to the player. So right now, they're just moving from left to right, but we actually want them to fall because in the real game, the player is going to be constantly falling due to gravity. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to need a third value, and that's going to be acceleration. So what is this acceleration value going to be? It's basically going to be the change in the speed or the velocity, whichever makes more sense to you, every single frame, right? And this is going to have to be a really small value because it's going to be changing our speed. What this will do is it'll kind of create this parabolic type of motion, so it'll kind of smoothly increase in speed rather than just sharply having the same speed throughout. And the reason this works is because if you kind of imagine like an object falling in real life, it's going to start moving downwards, but the more it moves downwards, the faster it'll be falling, right? As time progresses, its speed will increase. So that's basically what we're doing in here, right? We're using this acceleration value to determine how fast we increase the speed, and this speed will affect the position, right? So as the speed increases, the position will also be kind of jumping in greater gaps every single update, right? And so what we'll see now is once we add it, to our velocity, right? So we're adding the acceleration to our velocity and then the velocity to our position. The player is going to fall, and they're not just going to fall like in a diagonal, in a like linear kind of matter. They're going to fall slowly and then increase in speed, so they're kind of going to fall down like you would in real life to gravity. And the last thing is, yeah, so we have this value defined here. And so that was a bit of a quick descent, but you might have noticed it first fell slowly and then kind of increased in speed. So I'm going to just decrease this gravity value here. So this is the y acceleration here. So notice that 0 is set to x, and this is 0.0015 for me is set to the y. This basically means that the player isn't going to accelerate in any x direction. So horizontally, it's only going to be affected by the velocity, which we already set. And then the position will be affected at an increasing rate by this y value, and it's positive, which means downwards in this case, as the top left is 0, 0, and then the bottom right is kind of increasing. So that for our program is 640, 640. So I'm going to, again, decrease this. So let's try 0.075. And hopefully that way we can actually see kind of what's going on. So still a little quick. I'm going to try 0.001. And if that is... There we go. Okay. Now it's way too exaggerated. But hopefully you can kind of see kind of the smooth curve motion of the player, right? So I'm going to increase this now to, say, 4. And this will run basically differently on every single computer. And there we go. The player fell. Now I'm just running it a bit slow here so that you guys can see it over the stream, because I imagine it might be a little bit laggy. Feel free to make this run faster or however you want. And we'll be dealing with the issue of it moving differently on different computers later. So for now, it's totally fine if your values over here for the speed kind of and the acceleration are differently. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to basically store this value over here as its own value, right, as gravity, just to make this a little more clear what it's doing, right? And over here, we're going to have to do self.gravity, right? And ignore that. That's just to do with my indentation. Okay. So what we've got going on here is basically the position starting at 0, 0, and then this velocity is making it move from left to right, and then this acceleration is increasing its vertical velocity so that it starts falling downwards. And that's what creates that kind of curved motion of the player. And I'm just looking at the time now, and it's we're kind of an hour in now. So I think we're going to kind of leave it off here. I am excluding a small part that I want to include today, which is kind of moving over all of this player stuff into its own class, because we'll be adding different functionality to the game, and we're going to want to keep that separate from this main file. But that's not too urgent for now. So next week, what we're going to cover is that, as well as we're going to add collision detection in platforms. And we're also going to fix that issue, as I was saying, where it kind of runs differently on different computers. And that kind of wraps it up for today. So I hope you learned something from this. And again, I know we've only just started and we haven't gotten anything too exciting working yet, but I hope it's been a good introduction and that we were able to at least get something working today, right? So for next week, we're going to be focusing more on just the game's features, and that should be more fun than kind of what we had to deal with today, setting up all this Python stuff, making sure it runs on your computer, right? So with that said, does anyone have any questions? And also, I want to say, if you feel like you want to go a little ahead, I do have that PDF document, right? In that PDF document, I do go over kind of creating this third class you'll see in it. It's called the jumper class, right? If you want to go ahead and you can kind of read along and copy over that, if you have the time for it, feel free to do it. If not, we'll anyways cover it next week. So yeah, there's that if you're interested. So again, any questions? Is anyone having trouble getting stuff to run still? And if not, I know I've been holding you guys here for quite a while, so if you feel like you need to go or you're tired, then I'll see you guys next week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys. And if not, you can stay here, you can ask questions, or you can kind of hang out here for a little bit.